Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Ryan Nexus, and today we're going to be doing an overview of the history of Tyria leading up from Guild Wars 1 to Guild Wars 3. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And let's get into the info, guys. We're going to do kind of a video overview, and we're going to pause it and talk about it as we watch it. So let's get into
Welcome
it.
to the Explainer. Okay, today we are stepping into an incredibly deep timeline. We're going to trace the massive 11,000-year history of Tyria, the central world of the entire Guild Wars universe. Seeing the whole timeline laid out like this really puts this epic into perspective. We're charting the path from the absolute primal origins of the world, literally all the way to the dawn of Guild Wars 3.
Okay, let's dive into this. To make sure we don't get totally lost in millennia of lore, here is our roadmap. First, the origins of Tyria. Second, the Guild Wars 1 era. Then, the Guild Wars 2 era. And finally, the dawn of Guild Wars 3.
And so, like, these go not in chronological order, because like Guild Wars 3 is based before, like, 1,000 or so years before Guild Wars 1. So just keep that in mind, guys, when we're listening to this. It's gonna just go talk about each game as they were made in the time in real life timelines, and then they're gonna go back and talk about each timeline. So
So part 1, the origins of Tyria, the deep history of a living world.
Right, so long before humanity built its first cities, this supercontinent was forged in, well, unimaginable power. Our timeline kicks off with the very first Elder Dragon, who literally created Tyria and forged the other Elder Dragons. By around 20,000 before the Exodus, or BE, these Elder Dragons woke up for the first time, and man, it was just a cycle of pure devastation. To even have a shot at surviving, the ancient races had to team up, forging the Bloodstone and Shadowstone in a desperate bid to hide their magic from these apex predators. But that fragile alliance just couldn't hold. After a totally botched assault on the dragon Shaitan, their unity shattered. This led to centuries of brutal war, the Seers nearly getting wiped out, and the Mersat literally fleeing into a dimensional rift called the Mists. It's this vicious,
okay.
ancient cycle of creation and near extinction that really sets the highest possible stakes for the entire universe.
Now, it's absolutely crucial we understand exactly what these elder dragons are. We're not talking about oversized beasts you just hunt for sport. No way. These are
Okay.
ancient, primal threats. They're basically apocalyptic forces of nature that wake up in cycles for one reason: to consume all the world's magic. They are the ultimate lingering threat of the franchise. Literally everything that happens in Tyria, it's all a reaction to them existing.
So, way before human footsteps ever touched the continent, you had these 5 ancient races ruling Tyria: the
Okay, so
Seers,
one
the
second, guys. We're
Forgotten,
gonna talk
the
about these races here
Dwarves,
in a
the
minute.
Jotun, and the Mersat.
All right, so all these races right here were all ancient races in Tyria, and these were the ones before. If I get it right, I think these are the ones that were there on Tyria before the humans. So let's get into it.
These were the guys who had to face that very first awakening of the dragons. And honestly, it was their desperate alliances and their ultimate bitter betrayals that laid the absolute groundwork for the world's hidden magical mechanics.
Okay, let's jump forward a bit. We go from the rise of the dragons in 20,000 BE,
Maybe I got it
past the
wrong. Yeah,
mysterious
those are just
disappearance of
some
the
of the
last
races.
great giants around 10,000 BE, and we land at a massive turning point, 205
Okay.
BE. This is when the six gods, Balthazar, Dwayna, Melandru, Lissa, Grenth, and Cormyr, actually arrive on Tyria. They establish the magnificent city of Ara and
Yeah, there
really
you go.
start guiding early human civilization. The dragons go back to sleep, and boom, the age of humanity officially begins.
There you go. Yeah. So those other races were the ancient races before humans, and then now the humans are starting the beginning in the Guild Wars franchise.
Moving on to Section 2, the Guild Wars 1 era, the foundational mythos.
There we go.
All right, let's step directly into the original trilogy that kicked off this whole franchise. The developers built out the modern Tyrian world at a blistering pace here. Between 2005 and 2007, we got Prophecies, Factions, Nightfall, and the Eye of the North expansion, all crammed into a
Yep.
tight 3-year window. And every single one of these standalone campaigns layered incredibly deep lore right onto the map.
It all started with prophecies, and of course the devastating searing.
And listen, this wasn't just some border skirmish. The Char invasion literally rained magical fire down on the human kingdom of Ascalon, turning it into a
Yep.
completely scorched wasteland. This
And I think,
cataclysm ended the original guild wars between the human
yeah.
nations and forced all those desperate Ascalonians
And see, like in Guild Wars 1, the Char were like the main threat pretty much. At least from what I can remember. But I think the Char were like the main threat in Guild Wars 1. But as in Guild Wars 2 happened, the Char were like allied with, there was still some enemy Char, but there was a portion of them that was all good Char. So like they had the Black Lands, the Black Citadel, and that's where all the Char City was and stuff. And so yeah, and then there was the Flame Legion, which was one of the enemy factions of the Char. So yeah, let's get into it.
refugees to make that brutal trek across the dangerous Shiver Peak Mountains over to Krita. What's really wild is how fast the setting expanded culturally after that. Factions took us way down south to Kantha, this incredibly rich, isolated empire, just so we could fight the betrayer, Shiro Tagachi. Then, seriously just months later, Nightfall shifted everything over to the vibrant, desert continent of Alona. And the stakes
Yep.
skyrocketed here. We went from fighting mortal wars to literally trying to stop Abaddon, a rogue god who's trying to break out of his prison.
And then the grand finale of this era, Eye of the North in 2007. We head
Yep.
up to the far Shiver Peaks to take on the Great Destroyer. Now, this specific expansion is a total game changer. It wasn't just a victory lap for the first game, it acted as the direct narrative bridge, connecting everything we just did straight into our next era. It gave us that terrifying hint that, yep, the Elder Dragons were starting to stir.
And see, like, they are going to go back and add more stuff to both Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2, even though they're still working on Guild Wars 3. But the good part about this is they can re-innovate the land of ore and have it mainly, even though it's in a different timeline, they can go back and visit or and see what happened, but like between Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2, and of course Guild Wars 3 before all that, and see how the land progresses. And I think they can always add more locations too as time goes on after the game's out, because it'd be really cool to see if they added another zone that was from the very beginning in the timeline and slowly led up to Guild Wars 1.
Again. So, what was the result of all this insane world building? Try 6 million units sold by 2009. That is a massive
Man, that's
number.
a lot.
It totally proved that this
That is a
foundational
lot.
era of Tyria was a place players desperately wanted to be.
Which brings us to Section 3, the Guild Wars 2 era. The living world awakens.
Yep.
Okay, fast forward 250 in-game years, and the scope of the whole franchise just totally shifts. In the Guild Wars 1 era, we were dealing with the immediate, gritty survival of Ascalonian refugees and these really isolated human continents. But in the Guild Wars 2 era, it becomes this massive, persistent open world. You aren't just playing humans anymore. Now you're rolling as Char, Azura, Norn, or Sylvari. Those old localized conflicts actually evolved into a desperate worldwide struggle against the awakening Elder Dragons.
And see, one thing about those different races, well, specifically the Sylvari were born from the Pell Tree, and that was in a timeline of Guild Wars 2 only. So, like, the Sylvari aren't going to be in a Guild Wars 3, because Guild Wars 3 is based before Guild Wars 1 even. So, but they could easily add some new lore that would create a new race, kind of like an elf type race, that was maybe introduced and maybe gone extinct in both Guild Wars 1 and Guild Wars 2. But I think they can add another race by creating new lore involving that race. And just this Guild Wars 3 is based before all those games, but it also doesn't have a lot of lore behind it because it's very new and it's so far back in the timeline. There's not going to be much info on it. But yeah, I really think they can create another race kind of like the Sylvari, but not the Sylvari.
The
So,
franchise really hit its stride by shifting to this continuous living world model, relentlessly pushing the boundaries of the map.
Just look at this run. Heart of Thorns gave us those ridiculously dense jungle regions in 2015. Path of Fire brought in what are arguably the best mountain mechanics in gaming, while expanding Alona in 2017. End of Dragons finally took us back to a radically changed Cantha in 2022. And then Secrets of the Obscure in 2023 actually took us up into the sky. They just kept pushing the lore in the world further year after year.
And that created this relentless, confident cadence of expansions leading right up to today. I mean, 2023 gave us Secrets of the Obscure, 2024 delivered Janthier Wilds, and now 2025 brings us Visions of Eternity. The living world has literally never stopped expanding.
And I don't think they're going to stop at that either for Guild Wars 2. They already said they're going to support Guild Wars 2 in the future. And I think they're going to add a lot of really good content in the future.
But let's zoom in on Visions of Eternity for a second. Why does this one matter so much? Because it's not just another standard content drop. It is the definitive climax of the current era. It serves as this incredibly dramatic narrative lead-in that perfectly, and I mean perfectly, sets the stage for the next massive leap in Tyria's history.
And just to put into perspective how vibrant this world is right now, 12 million. That is the number of monthly active players as of 2025.
That's a lot.
After
That's
more
a
than
lot.
a
And
decade, the Guild
that's from 2025 also. Like from 2025 to now, 12 million players. That's a lot. And it's already skyrocketing since the release of the info about Guild Wars 3 and Guild Wars Reforged.
Wars 2 era is more live, more populated, and honestly more successful than it's ever been.
Finally, Section 4, Dawn of Guild Wars 3, The Next Evolution.
Pivoting to the future here, the hype is absolutely real, guys. Guild Wars 3 is the next standalone entry in the series. Let me repeat that. It is not an expansion, it's a major standalone leap forward. With a beta release listed for 2025, it promises to pick up.
It's not the beta. That's wrong information. The beta release is going to be coming out in 2027. So just keep that in mind. That's wrong information. It was a typo.
The torch directly from Visions of Eternity. We know it's going to deeply explore that foundational Elder Dragon lore and the ancient Char conflicts that have basically defined this universe since back in 2005.
The sources actually describe it perfectly. They call it, quote, a major narrative and gameplay leap, bridging the gap between the original trilogy and the modern era. This isn't just about slapping some better graphics on it, you know? It's about honoring those 11,000 years of deep history we just talked about, taking all the lessons learned over 20 years of development, and forging something completely new.
And see, like, since this game is going to be based before Guild Wars 1, there's going to be a lot of, like, relatable nostalgia to, like, the history and lore of Guild Wars. Because, like, people who played Guild Wars 1 and then grew up playing Guild Wars 2 also, this will be, like, going back to the very beginning of all things Guild Wars. So I think it's going to be a very unique timeline, and I think they can do a lot with it.
What does this all mean? Well, it leaves us staring at a massive unknown. What happens to Tyria after Visions of Eternity? The dust is eventually going to settle, but a world that was shaped by ancient gods and then completely devastated by elder dragons, it's going to have to find a new equilibrium.
The legacy of the Elder Dragons awaits. We've traced this timeline from the birth of the very first dragon, all the way to a thriving, persistent world of 12 million players. The stage is perfectly set, which leaves us with one final thought. How will the alliances of men, beasts, and spirits hold up when the next great shift happens? Thanks so much for joining me on this.
Guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe, and follow me on Twitch also, and of course YouTube. And so, thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. If you watched the full video, got to this point, leave me some comments saying what do you think of the new timeline of Guild Wars 3, and what do you think it could turn out to be, and what you think could happen in it. So, hope you enjoyed today's video, and see you.